So have you talked into a mic? Do you know how to hold it close to? Ah, good.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming in and taking refuge from the sunshine. I know it's hard. My name's Christa Wessel, and I am the morning host at what I hope is your favorite radio station, All Classical FM. Again, thanks for coming. I'm so thrilled when I get to do these pre-concert interviews with a musician in the symphony. I've got one here. His name is Charles Reneau. Do you like Charles or Charlie?
I usually go by Charlie.
Charlie. And he is the bass trombonist of the Oregon Symphony. Thanks for doing this with me.
My pleasure.
So, you just came off a mountain a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I was really lucky I had time to take a shower. I'm sure you appreciate that. I'm in a mountaineering class, so I spent all afternoon practicing using an ice axe. And my arms are really sore, and I'm about to fall asleep, but I think it's going to be a good concert tonight. By the time the bells start going in the Mussorgsky, I think I'll be waking up. So.
Yeah, Mussorgsky will wake anybody up, that's for sure.
Right.
That instrument's not light. Are you going to have trouble holding it up?
I'll manage.
Okay. I'm worried about you now.
I'll be okay.
Since you've moved to Oregon, but even before that, you've been kind of an avid outdoors person.
Yeah, I think my parents took us on camping, and we're from East Tennessee in the southern Appalachians.
Did somebody say yes? Nice.
Yeah, my grandparents live in the Smokies, and we spent a lot of time outdoors, and I think I feel very at home here in Portland, partly because we're in the middle of two mountain ranges. And I was just on a bike ride the other day near Mosier. Did everybody know where that is? Near Hood River. Very, very lovely town. I rode up a road there that it looked just like North Carolina, East Tennessee, North Carolina. It looked a lot like home, so it was a good feeling.
Oh. Well, we can talk about that all day long. There's probably a lot of avid outdoors people in the audience today. But let's talk about your instrument.
Okay.
You've brought it with you.
Yeah.
It's easy to recognize that as a trombone, but I don't know how many people know what the difference between a bass trombone and a regular trombone is. He says it weighs a ton more.
It does weigh a good bit more. So the trombone is a very simple instrument. The defining characteristic is, can anybody tell me? The slide, yeah. It solves a kind of a physics problem. The trumpet, back in the day in the 1400s, could only play a certain few notes. With a slide, you have a chromatic range. You can play all the notes of the scale. So the only difference between a tenor and a bass is the fact that the bass trombone has a couple of added valves that allow me to play in the lower register with greater facility. And
those valves affect all this squiggly stuff up here.
Right. When I press this
trigger.
That's
officially what it's called.
The squiggly stuff, yeah. Or the plumbing, that's what we usually call it. So when I press this trigger here, I change key. When I press this trigger, I change key in a different way. When I press them two at once, I change them both in a different way again. So I'll demonstrate. Just open horn sounds right now.
Look out, you guys.
That's the open B flat. Now if I depress my F trigger, I play an F. Now if I press the second trigger, my middle finger trigger here on the bottom, I get a G flat. And if I press them both triggers together, I get a D.
That's pretty.
So you probably, I don't know if you've come to the symphony a lot, you've probably heard me play before because it's one of the loudest instruments in the orchestra. It has the highest flow rate of any wind instrument. So
what does that mean, flow rate?
So when I put my lips up to the mouthpiece, I'm blowing a lot of air through. The Bernoulli effect, does anybody remember that from aeronautics? Yeah. The Bernoulli effect creates a vibration through the mouthpiece all the way through the instrument. All the way through the instrument, and it's the amount of air blowing through that you could describe as the flow rate. So when you see me back there, I'm taking very large breaths, and I'm breathing all the time. There are very few phrases that I can play the whole phrase the whole way through, and that's because the instrument sucks air, basically. So So it creates a lot of energy. I think of it as a very dynamic instrument. And I think that's one of the great joys to me of playing the bass trombone. And I would compare that favorably even with the tenor trombone or the trumpet. Those instruments are more of a focused process. And my process is more of unleashing energy as well as I can. It's like riding a tiger. I want only the control that allows me to not die or not make a bad impression on anybody. I don't want it to get ugly, but I want to get as much energy out to the hall as I can. So.
And you're encountering very little resistance. I'm thinking about a French horn that has something like 12 feet of tubing coiled up into a small circle. You don't have much of that, so you're not meeting as much resistance as a horn player or a trumpet player.
Right. Even the tuba, you might think, oh, well, the tuba, that's much bigger, has a much higher flow rate because of the fact that it has so many bends, does have a lower flow rate than the bass trombone. But the tuba has such a distinctive sound and plays in a distinctive register that you'll often hear the two of us together. You'll hear the tuba about as much as you'll hear me if you listen very closely. So
you and the tuba must double each other quite frequently. Do you find yourself playing in unison with the tuba most of the time?
Yeah, Jatik is my real partner at work. And it's one of the great things about playing here is Jatik, the tuba player, is a very fine musician and a good guy, too. If he wasn't easy to get along with or easy to play with, my job wouldn't be nearly as cool. I really like it, and that's one of the main reasons. He and I play together almost everything we do. If you hear us back, the Mussorgsky again tonight is a great example. Almost every time you hear him or me, we're playing together. Now there are a few things he plays apart from me, but for the most part, we're doing things, melodies specifically together.
You're playing, I'm assuming you're not really taking the melody in most pieces that you're playing, but in the Mussorgsky, you do have the melody?
Right, so another feature, if you've heard a bunch of concerts over the last year, is that you'll hear bass lines from myself and Jatik, and you'll hear low notes kind of sticking out of the texture every now and then, but what you usually don't hear is do, 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 do. You don't hear a melody. We don't usually play a whole lot of melodies. It's really nice to get a melody once in a while, and in the Mussorgsky we have 5 or 6. It's pretty rare. And again, with Jatik, with the tuba player, we can create the feeling of a melody that's different from either one of us playing it alone. We create both more sound, but also a different sound, a more blended, an interesting blend of high overtones from the trombone and low overtones from the tuba. So,
well, if you're playing principally most of your stuff with the tuba, how is it you fit in with the other 2 trombones in the section?
So, I have 3 roles. The first is the high voice in the tuba trombone duet. The second is the low voice in the trombone trio. And the third is as a bridge between the tuba and the trombone section. So when we're all 4 playing at once, my job is to fit in the middle and try and get these guys to compromise on sound. And I'm the guy in the middle. When it's me and the tuba, I'm trying to put out a more compact trombone sound. And when I'm playing with the trio, I'm trying to make a nice full lower sound to just like you would in a choir. Yeah.
So my next question is, why the bass trombone? Why not just tenor trombone, first or second trombone? Why the bass trombone?
Why do I play the bass trombone?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's the same reasons anybody should play the bass trombone, because it's the best instrument in the orchestra. It's got the best job in the orchestra. I have so much fun playing, and I think it goes back to, again, because it's a very physical instrument, it's a very physically involved instrument, it takes a lot of energy. There's no shrinking violet sitting in a bass trombone chair anywhere in America. We tend to be fairly aggressive kind of guys. So
I can tell you're very much a wallflower
right.
sitting here.
All that breathing, exactly, yeah. I'm taking deep, healthy breaths every day for a living. And it does, I think that's...
Breathing for a living.
Should live
I
to
like
be
that.
150 years old, right?
So when you started playing, though, I assume you started on a tenor trombone, a regular trombone.
So let's get back to this. Why I play bass trombone? It's because I played trombone in high school, but then I got braces and I couldn't play high anymore. So it was It wasn't, actually, the fact that I played trombone at all is a mistake. I was supposed to be a percussionist when I got into the band, but I sat looking at that mallet instrument. I'd been playing piano for years, but I looked at the mallet instrument and said, I don't know how to do that. So they said, well, we have an extra trombone, and we need somebody to play trombone in the band. So it's a random thing how you end up on an instrument, but it just so happens that I had an affinity for it. And then when I got braces again, I started playing bass trombone because I couldn't play high anymore, and the register of the trombone, the bass trombone, allows you to play a little bit more competently, even if you've got a bunch of metal in your mouth. So I found an affinity for it after the fact, and when I got the braces off, I said, you know what, I'm going to keep playing this bass trombone. This is the best part in the orchestra, most interesting.
So, and what I hear you saying is that a tenor trombone, you might have to mash the instrument against your face a little bit harder than playing a bass trombone?
My students try to do that, and I always tell them that they shouldn't do that because, well, I don't want to get it. That's a little bit boring, but you shouldn't be pressing so much harder, but the focus and the embouchure is greater. And I have to tell you, the pressure on those guys to play is much higher because we are playing these trombones. So I'm playing in the kind of the low register of the trombone. They're playing in the high register of the trombone. It gets harder. The notes are closer together, which means that, say if my lips are a millimeter off, I might hit the note funny, but I'll hit the note. If their lips are a millimeter off, they'll hit another note entirely, a different note. It'll be obvious. They'll go, but if I do that same kind of, gross mistake in movement, I'll go, bo, instead of what I really want to go is, bo. So if I was playing tenor trombone, my embouchure would have to be a little bit more finely focused into the high register, and I like not having to worry about that quite as much.
So you talked about playing piano and then being asked to play mallets in band and then not succeeding in that and then being asked to play trombone and then on to bass trombone. So my conclusion is that you've always known you wanted to be a musician.
Well, my parents are musicians and my grandparents are musicians. So while I wouldn't say that I always knew I wanted to do it, I always knew it was an option. And they didn't encourage me specifically to become a professional musician. When I said, I'm thinking about it, they said, well, we think you do it well. But I had no plans on doing it until high school, and somebody said, hey, you're playing really well at trombone. Why don't you keep doing that? And so I kept with it.
So it took you till high school to decide that you were going to pursue this as a career?
Right. Yeah, I was about 17 or 18 before I decided to do that for a living.
That's kind of surprising for me to hear. I think a number of the musicians in the Oregon Symphony probably started at a very young age, were very driven.
Oh, well, the string players have to start. Their fine motor skills are just finer than mine. And another problem here is this trombone. It's impossible to play it until you're a certain height. I've got the arm span for it. I have a 7th grader, and the poor kid, he's about this tall.
A student, you mean?
Yeah, a student. And if he wants to play in 7th position, he has to go use like that. He has to use the length of his shoulder to augment the length of his arm to make it long enough. So the string players, if they didn't start by the age of 4 or 5, have to catch really a long way up. That's how long it takes them to develop these very fine motor skills. Sometimes you hear the 10,000-hour rule. It takes 10,000 hours of practice to develop mastery. And I think that might be true for trombone, but I don't think 10,000 hours is nearly enough for violin. So yeah, it's easier to become a musician as a late bloomer on one of the wind instruments. That's for sure.
So is it accurate to say that you just kind of fell into a musical career? You didn't particularly want to pursue music when you were an adolescent? Right.
Well, my parents, like I said, were musicians, so they forced me to take piano lessons for 10 years, and then they forced me to join the band in the first place. So while it would be inaccurate to say that they forced me to become a musician, they just forced me to play music all the time. I don't think they knew that I was going to start enjoying it. Actually, I know that they really knew that I didn't enjoy it for a long time. It was only after I started enjoying it that they, oh, you actually could do this for a living. Oh, yeah. No, I actually almost ran away from home. My mom made me join the band. I said, no, I don't want to do that. She said, no, you're quitting Boy Scouts. You've got to do something social. Otherwise, it'll be the end of you. So you'll just sit in your bedroom and read books all day long. So she made me join band. I threatened to run away, but she made me do it. I think it was a good choice.
I think it was a good choice too, Charlie. So you mentioned that your family are all musicians, in orchestras, gigging musicians. What do they do?
Right. My mom is a voice professor at a college. She teaches singing. My dad is a violin instructor at colleges and also is the concertmaster of the Huntsville Symphony. Some of y'all might know the name Huntsville Symphony from Gregory Voida. He's their new conductor.
And Carlos Miguel Prieto used to conduct.
So this week we're working with Carlos Miguel Prieto. That's my brother's conductor. My brother plays in the Louisiana Philharmonic. So he plays third trumpet there. So when Carlos Prieto is here, I've got to be on good behavior so that my brother doesn't get in trouble. And when Gregory's here, I've got to be on good behavior so my dad doesn't get in trouble. And I've actually played under Carlos Miguel Prieto in Huntsville. And I met him in Jalapa one time. I was down visiting someone in Jalapa when he was conducting there. And so I've had a, we sometimes say music is a really small world, but it really helps if you've got 7 or 8 musicians in your family who are professional musicians. It's a small world, but it's really small when you have all these feelers out there. We live all over the United States and we make music professionally all over the United States. So I'm kind of surprised when I meet somebody I don't know, actually.
Where were you before you won this job at the Oregon Symphony?
I was in the Honolulu Symphony for 1 season. Yeah, aloha. That was a really great year. And Christa asked me the other day, well, of all the places you've lived, because I've lived a number, which would you think is the best? And I think it's Portland, but Honolulu is a pretty close second because there's something to say for the weather. I really like that. Yeah. So I played bass trombone there for 1 season, and it was very good. And then took the audition here in 2007, in May of 2007, and then moved here in September or August.
And your schooling was Juilliard, your graduate degree?
I've got a master's degree from Juilliard and an undergraduate degree from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Anybody out there? No.
Sorry, pal.
There's one back there. Hey, how about them dogs? Yeah. So, yeah.
And was this the first professional audition that you took? Were you auditioning for ages and ages?
Right. So you're a young trombone player. You go through high school, you're first in all state or whatever. You go through college, you're the #1 kid in your college. Then you go to grad school, and maybe you're not the #1, but you're getting all this positive feedback. And then you get out of school, and all right, I'm ready to start earning money and playing for people. And now you have to win an audition. And that is that's a bar that's very hard for many people to get over. You can look at the music industry as a series of funnels, an ever decreasing size. It's not hard to be a successful high school musician or even college musician. Even get in grad school, it's not that hard, relatively speaking, but to get a full-time job playing a musical instrument, that's something else entirely. And so a lot of us get out of grad school and spend some years just freelancing or taking, like I did, a 1-year position in Honolulu, and taking the auditions that come up. And if you can imagine, for bass trombone, there's 1 bass trombonist in the orchestras in America. There are about 50 orchestras in America that play a full living wage. So, okay, so which one of those 50 is going to have an audition this year? Maybe none. And some years I've been watching the news, there are no auditions. Some years there are 2, maybe 3 at the most. Now, again, these are great jobs, right? So the person who wins that audition is likely to stay there for 30 or 35 years. They will stay until they're not physically able to play often, or they're tired of it. I know a guy who's stopping playing in an orchestra to become a computer programmer, and I think that's pretty silly. But for the most part, we don't quit; we retire. So that means that there's not very many auditions, and it gets frustrating because, like I said, you've got all this positive reinforcement. You're a good trombone player. You're a good trombone player. Everyone is telling you this all the time, but to bump yourself up into that next level takes some people a long time. I was really lucky. This was probably the 4th or 5th audition I'd ever taken. And, well, I say lucky. It's not like I didn't work really hard for it. But at the end of the day, It wasn't really how I played. It was how I played in relationship to the other 80 players who were at the same audition I took. When I played here, there were 80 other guys. And, you know, a lot of them were very fine. I know for a fact that some of them play trombone better than I do. But when Carlos Calamar, our music director, makes a decision about a musician, he makes a decision holistically and trying to make a decision about who he thinks will fit in the orchestra. So it can feel to a young and up-and-coming musician that it's a little bit random, but it's not random, it's just subjective with as many objective criteria as we can put in the audition process as possible, but still in the end it's a subjective call.
I have musician friends who will see, say, a trumpet position open at the National Symphony in Washington, D.C., and they'll say, I'm going to take that audition because there aren't that many auditions available to take, but I play in a way that the National Symphony doesn't particularly care for. Like each conductor brings a whole set of criteria, what they're looking for from each individual player. So based on what you say, or do you say that Carlos wanted your sound versus the 80 others who may have played better, but he liked your sound?
Right. Yeah. There are subtle stylistic differences from orchestra to orchestra, and there are big stylistic differences from country to country. And I think that when a conductor makes a decision about that kind of thing, they're trying to thread a needle through a bunch of needle. Carlos was thinking, okay, now how do I sound with Jatik, the tuba player? How do I sound with Aaron and Robert, the other trombone players? How do I blend with the principal trumpeter? How would I sound playing by myself with the string section? Because all of these various combinations of orchestration do occur. And so he's trying to make a decision about how I will play with this ensemble. And I think it has to do with tone color, the kind of articulation you use, how loud you play, how soft you are able to play, the kind of phrasing you create for the music you're playing.
Well, I am truly looking forward to hearing tonight's program. You play on the first and last pieces, right?
The Alpha and Omega.
And you have, I'm going to say, Pictures is probably your favorite of the two, right?
Yeah. I'd forgotten how hard it was when we played it the other day for the first time. I've played it a bunch of times, and it's got to be one of the top favorites of my
What makes
career.
it so hard to play?
Like I said, we're playing the melody a lot, and when you're playing a melody, you can't just go. You really have to carry your sound out, but in a way that's vocal, and not just aggressive, not very pointed, but very vocal and melodic. So it's a challenge.
Well, thanks for doing this with me tonight. Charlie Reneau is our bass trombonist of the Oregon Symphony. If you know a friend that maybe would be interested in this conversation, it's being videotaped tonight and will be available. I don't know whether you know that. We were videotaped tonight. It'll be available on the All Classical website starting later on tonight, so you can go back and watch yourself too.
Oh, my family will be so pleased.
Thank you, Charlie, for your time today. And thank you for coming. Enjoy the concert.